everyone, it's Nina and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing a look at all of the books I have bought so far this year and kind of go through which ones I've read, which ones I haven't yet, and which ones I've already unhauled since buying them. As I've mentioned before on this channel, I'm a big fan of Ariel Bissett, and I also listen to her podcast, Books Unbound. And her co-host Raylene was talking about one of her goals for the year to be reading half the books that she hauled throughout the year. And I was thinking of how people say, like, book buying and book reading are two different hobbies. And if you are a reader, there's probably a good chance that you own way more books that you haven't read than ones that you have read. Personally, I feel like I would want to keep a 75 read to 25 unread split in my library, since I don't really feel the need to hold on to a book unless it's a favorite. I want my eventual own collection to really reflect the books that I love, and have it be so that I can loan out the books that I like to people in my life who I think would also love them. Anyway, that being said, I looked through my book tracking spreadsheet where I had kept a list of all the books I had hauled this year, and I have broken them up into a couple different categories. So I figured today we could go through that and take a look at all of the books I've gotten, whether I've read them or not, and what my thoughts are on this metric of book buying versus reading. So with that intro out of the way, let's get into the video. In some of these categories, there are books that I have since unhauled, so obviously I don't have them to show you here physically now anymore. But the first category we're going to be looking at is the largest one, which is the books that I have bought but not yet read. So in this category, we have Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart, which I don't have anymore. I unhauled it in my last video. Then we have The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, Clariel by Garth Nix, American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis, How Should a Person Be by Sheila Heti, Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, Self-Made Boys by Anna Marie McLemore, You'll Be the Death of Me by Karen M. McManus, The Hunger Games Trilogy by Suzanne Collins, and I also have an audiobook in this category, which is Dark Rise by C.S. Packet. So in that category, there were two books that I ended up unhauling, and the rest of them I am still planning on reading at this point in time. Next category is books that I have bought this year and then read after I bought them. The first one is Unseelie by Evelise Hausman. This book I have since unhauled. Then we have Dead Collections by Isaac Fellman, which technically wasn't a book I bought. It was a gift from a friend, but I'm going to include it in this category because it is a book I received this year. Then we have the second volume of Husky and His White Cat Shizen by Meat Bun Who Doesn't Eat Meat. We also have the fourth and fifth volumes of The Grandmaster Demonic Cultivation by MXTX, Mysteries of Thorn Manor by Margaret Rogerson, Thousand Autumns by Meng Xie, which I have since unhauled, Bitterthorn by Kat Dunn, which I also have since unhauled, Cultish by Amanda Montell, and also an audiobook in this category, which is Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chapeko. Technically, I'm still in the middle of reading this book, but I've gotten over 50% of the way through, and I really like it, so I'm going to include it in this read category. The next category is books that I bought after I read them from another source, either as an audiobook through my library or a physical book through my library. And this is secretly a category I'm very interested in. I'm not that much of a new release girly in terms of buying stuff right when it comes out. I'd much rather wait and put a hold on it through my library and get it on their time schedule. But there are some books that I read through the library that I feel like I can see having a space in my own personal library because I love them so much. The first one in that category is Vespertine by Margaret Rogerson. I read this last year and really enjoyed it, and I decided I do think I want to eventually own all of Margaret Rogerson's books. And I really like the paperback version of this. I just really like this design of the ravens along the side. I know usually people hate this little cutout thing, but I feel like it works really well for the design of this book specifically. And I've only had this for about a month. We also have The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. The first book in the series just got a hardback re-release, so I will be buying that one as well. And we'll also talk about the third book in this series in the next category of books. I also have a book that I don't currently have with me, which is Sell Out by Dan Ozzie. I originally bought this book as a gift for a friend, and I ended up reading a lot of it while I was waiting to have a time to give it to them. And I enjoyed it enough that I decided to buy another copy that me and my father are sharing, so it's currently at my parents' house and not in my collection right now. And the last book in this category is another audiobook, and that is A Marvelous Light by Freya Marsk. I love this book so much, and I really like the audiobook, and I've been trying to convince my wife to read it, so I figured getting it as an audiobook would be the best way to encourage her to start it. But I probably will end up buying a physical copy of the entire series once the third book comes out. Okay, the last category we are going to be talking about is books that I have pre-ordered, so most of these are not out yet. And because of that, I don't really count them as part of my unread book category because I don't have access to getting ARCs of any of these books. And some of these books don't even have ARCs available to the general public anyway. So they're kind of books I can't physically read yet, if that makes sense. Except for one of them, which I do now have because it came in the mail recently. I usually only pre-order books if I think within a month or two of them coming out that I'm going to want to read it. So these are basically new releases that I really, really care about. And so far, that's pretty much only sequels of books I've read from before or new books from authors that I really like. Or a very small category is the books that are part of book subscription boxes. And the one book that I have from this category physically is The Sun and the Void by Gabriela Romero Lacruz. This book came in the June Illumicrate, and I'm very excited to check this out. Some other books in this category are Foxglove by Adeline Grace, which will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, so I definitely will be reading it as soon as it comes out. We also have Unholy Terrors by Lyndall Clipstone, A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber, which is the third book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. I ended up pre-ordering the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, which will not match the other two UK editions that I have, but it's perfectly fine. At least I'll have a set of all hardcovers now in the future. We also have A Grim and Sunken Vow by Ashley Shuttleworth. And lastly, the third volume of Husky and His White Cat Shizun by Meat Bun Who Doesn't Eat Meat. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the books that I have since unhauled. Of the 31 books that I have bought this year, 5 of them I have since unhauled, 3 of them I read, and 3 of them I didn't. And of those 31 books that I bought, 14 of them I have now read, so I'm a little bit under 50% in terms of the amount I've read. And 4 of those were books I bought after I got them from another source. Of the books that I read after buying them, 7 of them I'm keeping and 3 of them I'm giving away. So I guess that means roughly 70% of the time, if I go into a book kind of blindly, I will like it enough to want to keep it. But 30% of the time, it might be a dud that I end up unhauling. It doesn't really show from these statistics, but I think it's actually kind of more likely that I will actually unhaul a book because I lose interest in it before I actually read it and decide to unhaul it then. Or will hold onto books for multiple years at a time, because there's definitely some books that I read this year that I had bought in previous years and then unhauled. So I feel like I should start to do more tracking of things over time in my own owned library to see how things change over the years. Okay, now to kind of wrap up and talk about things I feel like I've learned from doing this experiment. I feel like overall, when it comes to reading, the library is my best friend. I really feel like I use the library hold system similar to how other people would be when they impulse buy a book when they're out book shopping. I really only want books that I think I will want to hold onto for a long time in my permanent collection. So using the library and then having like no commitment to keeping those books if I don't enjoy them definitely is better for my reading habits. And I guess the alternative to that is the fact that cheap book sources are also my best friend. We love a used bookstore or a thrift store. Or I used to use, but not as much now, places like Thrift Books or other like online sources for thrifting. I feel like there's almost always a little bit of buyer's remorse when I buy a book that's new and over $15. So having a way to get books where they're only like $2 or $3 is definitely way better for my mental health. That being said, I do think it's really important to buy books in any way, shape, or form. Even if I don't want a book in my physical library, I would rather buy an ebook or an audiobook over trying to pirate it from somewhere. Now, lastly, I wanted to talk about doing different book subscription services. I think I can still see myself doing book subscriptions because those books just inherently have a little more value. So if I end up not liking them, I can resell them, which I feel like is not really worth the time or the effort for like your standard release of a book. I can already tell you that I don't think I'm going to renew my Illumicrate subscription past the 3-month period that I have it. I already skipped July and August, and I think I might just get through the books in September and October. And really, I'm just holding on to it at this point because I think they're going to announce the 3rd edition of the Last Binding trilogy. And I really want to buy those editions of those books specifically because I think they're so beautiful. So that is a look at all of the books I've hauled this year. Let me know what your owned book statistics kind of look like. Do you feel like the books that you buy immediately are ones you read quickly? Or do you wait and hold on to them and only get to them years after the fact? I'm definitely going to try and read more from the books I have bought so far this year. So I guess you can consider the first category of books that I talked about as my somewhat immediate TBR. But anyway, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you guys, as always, so much for watching. Please consider following me on the Storygraph if you'd like to see my reading updates in real time. Consider liking this video or subscribing if you aren't already. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!